Okay, so, when we think about Louis the 16th, right, the image that kind of pops into our heads is like this, ineffective king kind of a guy who was just overwhelmed by the French Revolution.
Yeah.
But what if that picture is just, I don't know, incomplete? What if there were all these like hidden financial problems or like secret dealings with other countries and all this unseen political pressure that played like a way bigger role in his downfall than we usually think about?
That's a really good point. I
Mhm.
think that like the typical story we hear about Louis XVI really focuses on, his own personal problems. But when we actually look closely at the sources we have for this, it reveals like a much more complex web of stuff going on behind the scenes
Yeah.
that really contributed to, the whole upheaval of the revolution.
Right. It wasn't just that he couldn't rule.
Right.
So for everyone listening today, this deep dive is kind of like getting a backstage pass at Versailles
Okay.
and sneaking into the secret meetings of revolutionary Paris. We're going to explore the less obvious stuff about Louis XVI's life, like the shaky finances, the controversies with Marie Antoinette, and all the political games that were going on behind everyone's backs,
Yeah.
to really give you a better understanding of this huge turning point in history.
Yeah.
Our mission today is to unpack those hidden layers.
And understanding that stuff is really key to getting why Louis XVI was in such a tough spot.
Yeah.
Because he didn't inherit like a stable kingdom.
Right.
It was already kind of on the verge of falling apart because the issues that had been around for a long time.
Right. So let's start from the beginning. Louis XVI's personality wasn't exactly what you'd expect from an absolute monarch, right?
Yeah.
Shy more into his workshop and hunting than all the complicated stuff of ruling a country.
Right.
A huge contrast to the powerful image of the kings that came before him.
Oh, totally.
Don't it?
So he was born in 1754, and the sources we have describe him as a pretty introverted guy.
Yeah.
And his passions were definitely not politics.
Yeah.
And his upbringing under his dad, who was pretty strict, was all about duty and responsibility.
Okay.
But it seems like he was missing the, the practical political skills he needed to handle all the challenges he ended up facing.
And it's not like he just inherited a throne, right? It
Yeah.
was a kingdom drowning in debt.
Exactly.
The sources talk about this hidden sense of uncertainty even when he first became king in 1774 because the economy was already such a mess thanks to Louis XV.
Oh, yeah, that's a heavy load for a new king to carry.
It really is like a dark cloud hanging over everything.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the kingdom's finances were already in really bad shape.
Right.
And that crisis basically set the stage for everything that came after. It wasn't a fresh start at all.
Right.
It was more like inheriting a whole bunch of financial trouble.
Okay, so this brings us to a super important but often overlooked part of the story, the financial crisis.
Yeah.
We all know France was in trouble, but the sources highlight a huge, almost like secret reason for it. The enormous financial support they gave to the American relief. That must have been a massive drain on their treasury.
It was a crazy amount of money. Imagine the pressure that put on a system that was already barely holding on.
So they're basically secretly funding this whole other war.
Yeah, and they're doing it without telling the people, which, doesn't really help with public trust.
Right, and this is like doubling the national debt.
Exactly.
And they're trying to keep it all under wraps.
It was a ticking time bomb.
And it wasn't like his finance ministers didn't know what was happening, right?
Yeah, they knew.
Like guys like Jacques Necker,
Right.
they're dealing with this behind the scenes.
Totally. They were in crisis mode.
Desperately trying to find solutions.
Right. The sources show them struggling with this, trying to figure out how to make things work.
Yeah.
But they were facing a situation where the government was spending way more than it was taking in.
Yeah.
And Louis XVI was really hesitant to touch a huge problem. The fact that the nobles and the clergy didn't have to pay taxes.
Oh man, that tax exemption must have been infuriating for the average person.
Oh, absolutely.
You're struggling to make ends meet. You see the wealthy getting a free pass,
Yeah.
and the king won't do anything about it.
Of course people are going to be upset.
Resentment's just brewing under the surface.
It's a recipe for disaster.
It really is. And on top of all this, you have Marie Antoinette.
Oh, yeah.
She becomes the target of a lot of public anger.
The poster child for everything wrong with the monarchy.
Right. The sources even call her a lightning rod.
Makes sense.
Now that "let them eat cake" quote is probably made up.
Yeah, most likely.
But it's stuck around for a reason, right?
Definitely. I mean, it symbolizes this idea that she was totally out of touch with what regular people were going through.
Yeah, and the sources talk about her lavish spending habits.
Oh, yeah?
Dresses, jewelry, the whole extravagant court life.
Right, and that becomes a big problem.
Especially when people are starving.
Exactly. It's this huge contrast.
Yeah.
The queen's living it up while the people are struggling to survive.
So that just fuels the public's frustration.
Oh yeah, they see her as a symbol of the monarchy's disconnect from reality.
But it's not just her lifestyle.
No.
The sources also point to her secret dealings,
Right.
her secret allegiances and secret negotiations with Austria, her home country.
This is where things get really interesting. She's actively trying to get help from other countries to protect the monarchy.
Wow.
There are even hints that she was trying to set up a military coup.
Seriously?
These were high-stakes secret deals going on,
Yeah.
all driven by her desire to keep the crown.
But this is a huge betrayal.
Right. She's basically saying she doesn't trust her own people and she'd rather rely on foreign powers,
Yeah.
which totally undermines the monarchy's legitimacy.
So Louis might have been seen as indecisive, but Marie Antoinette is actively trying to control things from behind the scenes.
Yeah, she's playing the game.
Which brings us to the Estates General in 1789, this moment of crisis.
Right. A major turning point.
But even then, there are all these secret things happening.
Not quite.
The flight to Varennes, for example.
Oh, yeah.
This very public failure of a secret escape plan.
It was a disaster.
Just to give some context, the Estates General was this national assembly
Right.
with representatives from the clergy, the nobility, and the commoners,
The three estates.
and it hadn't met in decades.
Wow.
So that just shows how serious the situation was.
Yeah, calling the Estates General was a public admission that things were falling apart.
Right, but then you have the flight to Varennes in June 1791,
Right.
this secret attempt to run away from Paris.
It backfired spectacularly.
It really did, Louis XVI trying to sneak out of the country.
It just shows how unwilling he was to face the revolution head on.
Yeah, he couldn't decide whether to deal with it or run away.
And it destroyed any trust people still had in him.
And it's not just Marie Antoinette looking for help from outside, right?
Yeah.
The sources say Louis was also secretly trying to get support from other European monarchies.
He was reaching out to Austria, Prussia, Spain,
Wow.
offering them potential military help to crush the revolution.
So publicly, he's pretending to go along with the changes.
Uh-huh.
But secretly, he's trying to get foreign armies to come in and stop everything.
Not exactly a long-term solution.
No, it's like he's playing both sides.
And it weakens his position even more.
It's all these hidden political games that bring him down.
Yeah, the lack of transparencies, the sense that he's not being honest with anyone, it all erodes his authority.
And when the monarchy finally falls in August 1792 and Louis is put on trial, all these secrets start coming out.
Yeah, the trial becomes this public reckoning with everything he'd been doing in the shadows.
All the secret letters, the
Well,
behind-the-scenes agreements.
It's all laid bare.
And the decision to execute him in January 1793.
A controversial decision for sure.
The sources suggest it wasn't just because of his own failures, but because of all this political secrecy, all the mismanagement, all the hidden agendas.
It's a different way of looking at his death.
It really is. It shows that these hidden problems had real consequences.
Absolutely. He chose to deal with things through secrecy instead of being open and trying to reform.
And the revolution might have ended very differently if he'd made different choices.
It's impossible to know for sure, but it definitely makes you think.
And even after the revolution, these secrets continue to shape how people view Louis XVI.
Right.
There's this idea of the good king who was just out of his depth.
Yeah, but his secret actions kind of ruin that image.
They do, and the revolutionaries themselves,
Yeah.
guys like Robespierre and Danton,
Right.
they use these secrets to their advantage. Right?
Oh, absolutely. They paint him as a symbol of everything wrong with the old system.
The corruption, the secrecy, the disconnect from the people.
Yeah, and it's interesting how even back then, the lack of transparency around finances and politics could destroy public trust.
Yeah, we see that even today.
It's a timeless lesson.
So when we look back at Louis XVI, it wasn't just about a king who couldn't handle the job.
Right.
It was this whole tangled web of hidden financial problems, secret deals with other countries, and all this political maneuvering.
It was a perfect storm.
That ultimately led to the collapse of the French monarchy.
And the sources really highlight how important those hidden factors were.
Yeah, it's a much more complex story than we usually hear.
For sure.
So for everyone listening today, as you think about this deep dive into the secret world of Louis XVI, ask yourself this.
Okay.
How much do hidden agendas and a lack of transparency contribute to the collapse of power even today? It's something to think about. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
You bet.
It was a good one.
Okay, we'll see you next time.
Let's see it.